What's poppin'? Welcome back to season 2 of Care Live with me, your book narrator, Kenzie Rock. So, this is episode 2. Episode 1, I did a rough intro about me and books. So, right now, we are getting ready to get into it. My favorite book of all times, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I apologize for not reading the first two and starting off at book 3, but I will give you a rough intro about it. So, for those who have never ever paid attention to reading Harry Potter, you're missing out, but gladly your girls got you. So, Harry Potter was a very sad boy in the beginning. He lost his parents, Lily and James Potter. Actually, he was told that they died in a car accident and he had to live with his very terrible aunt and uncle and very fat nephew, and they put him under the stairs. That was his bedroom. Real sad. But his childhood was not okay until one day he got a letter from Hogwarts that arrived with an owl, which I've always waited for 19 years but never seen one. It's okay though. So this is not about me, it's about Harry Potter. So he got the letter telling him that he was a wizard and he was accepted to Wizard Academy, which was Hogwarts. His happiness changed when his aunt and uncle realized that he had found out the secret. Turns out that the aunt and uncle hated wizards, but this was his chance to flee away, go to Hogwarts, and from there on he had a very magical life in 2 books, very magical adventures with his 2 best friends, Ron and Hermione. And for those who pronounce that name very weirdly, it's Hermione. But throughout the 2 books there was actually a very dark evil lord called Voldemort. Again, for those who pronounce it wrongly, it's Voldemort. And people were terrified of calling him by his real name, so they always called him you know who. And Harry was the only person who could pronounce his name. And once he knew that he was the one who had killed his parents and given him this very nice scar on his head, which was like a lightning shape. Yeah, he actually was struck by magic. And in this book and many others, you'll actually get to learn how the parents died and how Harry got to defeat Voldemort and how and why he is the strongest magical being, though he's also human, because the dad was magical but the mom was human. So, for a half-blood, and Hermione is also a half-blood, Ron was the only pure blood. But anyways, we will get on with the book after that very rough, weird, brief intro. But you can all get to know more about it if you read the actual books. So, but first, before we begin with J.K. Rowling's amazing book, here's a message from our sponsors. And we're back. So today's book is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. If you want to know more about Harry Potter books, you can check out www.scholastic.com/Harry Potter. And that's Potter, Potter. And this book is actually a #1 New York Times bestseller and a remarkable national bestseller by Scholastic printers. So, let's get into J.K. Rowling's world of Harry Potter. So we'll begin with chapter 1, The Owl Post. And this book has 22 chapters, mind you, and I hope that we would be able, praying that we will be able to finish this book. But I know we will. Though it might take so long, I know we will. So let's head on to it. Chapter 1. Harry Potter was a highly unusual boy in many ways. For one thing, he hated the summer holidays more than any other time of year. For another, he really wanted to do his homework, but was forced to do it in secret in the dead of night. And he also happened to be a wizard. It was nearly midnight, and he was lying on his stomach in bed, the blankets drawn over his head like a tent, a flashlight in one hand, and a large leather-bound book, A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot, propped open against the pillow. Harry moved the tip of his eagle feather quill down the page, frowning as he looked for something that would help him write his essay. Witch burning in the 14th century was completely pointless. Discuss. The quill paused at the top of the likely-looking paragraph. Harry pushed his round glasses up the bridge of his nose and moved his flashlight closer to the book and read. Non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, were particularly afraid of magic in medieval times, but not very good at recognizing it. On the rare occasion that they did catch a real wizard or witch, burning had no effect whatsoever. The witch or wizard would perform a basic flame-freezing charm, and they pretended to shriek with pain, while enjoying a gentle tickling sensation. Indeed, Gwendolen the Weird enjoyed being burnt so much that she allowed herself to be caught no less than 47 times in various disguises. Harry put his quill between his teeth and reached underneath his pillow for his ink bottle and a roll of parchment. Slowly and very carefully, he unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped his quill into it, and began to write, pausing every now and then to listen, because if any of the Dursleys heard the scratching of his quill on their way to the bathroom, he'd probably find himself locked up in the cupboard under the stairs for the rest of the summer. The Dursley family of number 4 Privet Drive was the reason that Harry never enjoyed his summer holidays. Vernon, Petunia, and their son, Dudley, were Harry's only living relatives. They were muggles, and they had a very medieval attitude towards Harry's magic. Harry's dead parents, who had a witch and wizard themselves, they were never mentioned under Dursley's roofs. For years, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon had hoped that if they kept Harry as downtrodden as possible, they would be able to squish the magic out of him, but to their fury, they had been unsuccessful. These days, they lived in terror of anyone finding out that Harry had spent most of the 2 years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The most they could do, however, was to lock Harry's spellbooks, wand, cauldron, and broomstick at the start of the summer break and forbid him to talk to any of the neighbors. This separation from his spellbooks had been a real problem for Harry because his teachers at Hogwarts had given him a lot of holiday homework. One of the essays, a particularly nasty one about shrinking potions, was for Harry's least favorite teacher, Professor Snape, who would be delighted to excuse and give Harry detention for more than a month. Harry had therefore seized his chance for the first week of the holidays, while Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and Dudley had gone out into the front garden to admire Uncle Vernon's new company car, in very loud noises so that the rest of the streets would notice too. Harry had crept downstairs, picked the lock on the cupboard under the stairs, grabbed some of his books, and hidden them in his bedroom. As long as he didn't leave spots of ink on his sheets, the Dursleys need never know that he was studying magic by night. Harry was very particularly keen to avoid trouble with his aunt and uncle at the moment, as they were already in an especially bad mood with him, all because he'd received a telephone call from a fellow wizard 1 week into the school vacation. Ron Weasley, who was one of Harry's best friends at Hogwarts, came from a whole family of wizards. This meant that he knew a lot of things Harry didn't, but had never used a telephone before. Most unlikely, it had never been Uncle Vernon who had answered the telephone call. "Vernon Dursley speaking." Harry, who had happened to be in the room at the moment, froze as he heard Ron's voice answer. "Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? I want to talk to Harry Potter." Ron was yelling so loud that Vernon jumped and held the receiver a foot away from his ear. staring at it with an expression of mingled fury and alarm. "Who is this?" he roared at the direction of the mouthpiece. "Who are you?" "Ron Wesley!" Ron beckoned back, as though he and Uncle Vernon were speaking from opposite ends of football field. "I am a friend of Harry's from school." Uncle Vernon's small eyes swiveled around to Harry, who was rooted at the spot. "There is no Harry Potter here!" he roared, now holding the receiver at arm's length, as though frightened it might explode. "I don't know who you are, or what school you're talking about. Never contact me again. Don't you come near my family." And he threw the receiver back onto the telephone, as if poisoned by a spider. The fight that had followed had been one of the worst ever. "How dare you give the number to people I don't like? People like you!" Uncle Vernon had roared, spraying Harry with spit. Ron obviously realized that he'd gotten Harry into trouble because he hadn't called again. Harry's other best friend from Hogwarts, Hermione Granger, hadn't been in touch either. Harry suspected that Ron had warned Hermione not to call, which was a pity, because Hermione was the cleverest witch in Harry's ear, and Muggle parents knew perfectly well how to use a telephone, and would probably have had sense not to say that she went to Hogwarts. So Harry had no word from any of his wizarding friends for 5 long weeks, and this summer was turning out to be the most of his worst. There was just one very small improvement. After swearing that he wouldn't hear to the letters that any of his friends sent, Harry had been allowed to let his owl, Hedwig, out of his night. Uncle Vernon had given in because of the racket Hedwig had been making in her cage all the time. Harry finished writing about Gwendoline the Weird and paused to listen again. The silence in the dark house had broken only by the distance, grunting snores of his enormous cousin Dudley. It might be very late, Harry thought, and his eyes were itching with tiredness. Perhaps he must finish the essay tomorrow night. He replaced the top of the ink bottle, pulled the old pillowcase from under his bed, put the flashlight, a history of magic book, his essay, quill, and ink inside it, got out of bed, and hid the lot under the loose floorboard under his bed. When he stood up, stretched, and checked on the time on the luminous alarm clock beside his bedside table, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. Harry's stomach gave a funny jolt. He had been 13 years old without realizing it, for a whole hour. Yet, another unusual thing about Harry was how little he looked forward to his birthdays. He had never received a birthday card in person in his life. The Dursleys had completely forgotten and ignored his last 2 birthdays, and he had no reason to suppose that they'd remember this one. Harry walked across the dark room, past Hedwig's large empty cage, to the open window. He leaned on the sill, the cool night air pleasant on his face after a long time under the blankets. Hedwig had been absent for 2 nights now. Harry wasn't worried about her. She'd been gone this long before, but she hoped that he'd be back soon. She was the only living creature in that house who would give a flinch at the sight of him. Harry, though still rather small and skinny for his age, had grown a few inches over the last year. His jet black hair, however, was just as it had always been, stubbornly untidy, whatever he did to it. The eyes behind the glasses were bright green, and only his forehead, clearly visible through his hair, was a tiny thin scar shaped like the bolt of lightning. Of all the unusual things about Harry, this scar was the most extraordinary of all. It was not, as the Dursleys had pretended for 10 years, a souvenir of a car crash that had killed Harry's parents, because Lily and James Potter had not died in a car crash. They had been murdered by the most feared dark wizard of 100 years, Lord Voldemort. Harry had escaped from the same attack with nothing more than a scar on his forehead, where Voldemort's curse, instead of killing him, had rebounded upon its originator. Barely alive, Voldemort had fled. But Harry had come face to face with him at Hogwarts. Remembering their last meeting, as he stood in the dark window, Harry had to admit he was lucky even to have reached his 13th birthday. He scanned the starry sky for a sign for Hedwig, perhaps soaring back to him, with a dead mouse dangling from her beak, expecting praise, gazing absently over the foottops. It was a few seconds before Harry realized what he was seeing. Silhouetted against the golden moon, and growing larger every minute, was a large, strangely lopsided creature, and it was flapping in Harry's direction. It stood quite still, watching it sink lower and lower. For a split second he hesitated, his hand on the window latch, wondering whether to slam it shut or not. But then the bizarre creature soared over one of the street lamps of Privet Drive, and Harry, realizing what it was, leaped aside. Through the window, soaring 3 owls, one of them holding up the third, which appeared to be unconscious. They landed with a soft flump on Harry's bed, and the middle owl, which was large and grey, keeled over and lay motionless. There was a large package tied to its legs. Harry recognized the unconscious owl at once. His name was Errol, and began to remember who it belonged to. It was from the Weasleys family. Harry dashed to the bed and tied the cords around Errol's leg and took off the parcel, and then carried Errol to Hedwig's cage. Errol opened one of his bleary eyes, gave a feeble hoot of thanks, and began to gulp some water. Harry then turned back to the remaining owls. One of them, the large snowy female, was his own Hedwig. She too was carrying a parcel, and looked extremely pleased with herself. She gave Harry an affectionate nip with her beak as he removed the burden, then flew across the room to join Errol. Harry didn't recognize the third owl, though, a handsome, tawny one. But he knew once where it had come from, because in addition of the third package, it was carrying a letter bearing the Hogwarts symbol crest. When Harry relieved the owl of its burden, it ruffled its feathers importantly, stretching its wings, and took off through the window into the night. Harry sat down on his bed and grabbed Errol's package, ripped off the bottom brown paper, and discovered a present wrapped in gold and the first ever birthday card. Fingers trembling slightly, he opened the envelope. 2 pieces of paper fell out, a letter and a newspaper clipping. The clipping had clearly come out of a wizarding paper, the Daily Prophet, because the people in the black and white picture were moving. Harry picked up the clipping and smoothed it out. It read, "Ministry of Magic Employee Scoops Grand Prize. Arthur Weasley, head of Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office at the Ministry of Magic, has won the annual Daily Prophet Grand Prize Galleon Draw. A delighted Mr. Weasley told the Daily Prophet, 'We will be spending the gold on a summer holiday in Egypt, where our oldest son Bill works as a curse breaker for the Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The Weasley family will be spending a month in Egypt, returning for the start of the new school year at Hogwarts, which 5 of the Weasley children are currently attending.'" Harry scanned the moving photograph, and grins spread across his face as he saw all 9 of the Weasleys waving furiously at him, standing in front of a large pyramid. Plump little Mrs. Weasley, tall balding Mr. Weasley, 6 sons and 1 daughter, all though the black and white picture didn't show it, with flaming red hair. Right in the middle of the picture was Ron, tall and gangling, with his pet rat, Scabbers, on his shoulder and his arm around his little sister Ginny. Harry didn't even think of anyone who deserved to win the large pile of gold more than the Weasleys, who were very nice and extremely poor. He picked up Ron's letter and unfolded it. Dear Harry, Happy birthday! Look, I'm really sorry about the telephone call. I hope the Muggles didn't give you a hard time. I asked Dad, and he reckons I shouldn't have shouted. It's amazing here in Egypt. Bill's taken us all around the tombs, and you wouldn't believe the curse all those old Egyptian wizards put on them. Mom wouldn't let Ginny come in the last one, though. There were all these mutant skeletons in there, the Muggles who'd broken in and grown extra heads and stuff. I couldn't believe it when Dad won the Daily Prophet draw, though. 700 galleons! Most of it is gone in this trip, but there's going to be more to buy a new one for next year. Harry remembered only too well the occasion when Ron's old wand was snapped. It had happened when the car the two of them had been in flying at Hogwarts had crashed into a tree on the school grounds. We'll be back about 2 weeks before the term starts, and we'll be going up to London to get my wand and our new books. Any chance of meeting you there? Don't let the Muggles get you down, Harry. Try to come to London. Ron. P.S. Percy's head boy now. He got the letter last week. Harry glanced at the photograph. Percy, who was in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts, was looking particularly smug. He had pinned his head boy badge to a fizz perched gently on top of his neat hair, the horn-rimmed glasses flashing in the Egyptian sun. Oh, Harry now turned into his present and unwrapped it. Inside was what looked like a miniature glass spinning top. There was nothing but a note from Ron beneath it. Harry, this is a pocket stethoscope. If there's someone untrustworthy around, it's supposed to light up and spin. Bill says it's rubbish, sold for wizard tourists and isn't reliable, because it kept lighting up at dinner last night. But he didn't realize Fred and George had put beetles in his soup. Bye, Ron. Harry put the pocket snickerscope in his bedside table, and it stood quite still, balanced on its point, reflecting luminous hands on his clock. He looked at it happily for a second, then picked up the parcel Hedrick had brought. Inside it, too, there was a wrapped present, a card, a letter, this time from Hermione. Dear Harry, Ron wrote to me and told me about his phone call to your Uncle Vernon. I hope you're all right. I'm on holiday in France at the moment, and I didn't know how I was going to send this to you. What if they'd opened it at customs? But then Hedrick turned up and thinks she saw to make sure that you got something for your birthday for a change. I bought your present by all order. There was an advertisement on the Daily Prophet. I've been getting it delivered. It's so good to keep up with what's going on in the wizarding world. Did you see the picture of Ron and his family a week ago? I bet he's learning loads. I'm really jealous. The ancient Egyptian wizards were fascinating. There's something interesting local history of witchcraft here, though. I've rewritten the whole history of magic essay, including some of the things I found out. I hope it's not too long. It's 2 rolls of parchment, more than Professor Binns asked for. Ron says he's going to be in London in the last week of holidays. Can you make it? Will Aunt and Uncle let you come? I really hope you can. If not, I'll see you at Hogwarts Express on September 1st. Love from Hermione. P.S. Ron says Percy's head boy. I'll bet Percy's really pleased. Ron doesn't seem too happy about it. Harry laughed as he put Hermione's letter down and picked up her present. It was really heavy. Knowing Hermione, he was sure it would be a large book full of difficult spells. But it wasn't. His heart gave a huge bound as he ripped up the paper and saw a sleek black leather case, the silver words stamped across it reading, "Broomstick Servicing Kit." "Wow, Hermione!" Harry whispered, unzipping the case and looked inside. There was a large bar of Fleetwood's high-finish handle polish and a pair of gleaming silver-tailed twig clippers, a tiny brass compass to clip on your broom for long journeys, and a handbook of do-it-yourself broom care. Apart from his friends, the thing that Harry missed most about Hogwarts was Quidditch, the most popular sport in the magical world. Highly dangerous, very exciting, and played on broomsticks. Harry happened to be the best Quidditch player. He had been the youngest person in the century to be picked up for the Hogwarts house teams. One of Harry's most prized possessions was his Nimbus 2000 racing broom. Harry put his leather case aside and picked up his last parcel. He didn't recognize at first the untidy scroll, but then he did when he looked it again. This was from Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper. He tore up the top layer of the paper and glimpsed something green and leathery. But before he could unwrap it properly, the parcel gave a strange quiver, and whatever was inside snapped loudly, as though it had jaws. Harry froze. He knew that Hagrid would never send him anything dangerous on purpose, but then Hagrid didn't have a normal person's view of what was dangerous. Hagrid had been known to befriend giant spiders, buy vicious three-headed dogs for men in pubs, and sneak illegal dragon eggs into his cabin. Harry poked the puzzle nervously. It snapped loudly again. Harry reached for the lamp on his side table and gripped it firmly with one hand and raised it over his head, ready to strike. Then he seized the rest of the wrapping paper with his hand and pulled, and out fell a book. Harry just had time to register its handsome green cover, embezzled with golden title, "The Monster Book of Monsters," before it flipped into its edge and startled sideways along the bed like some weird crab. "Uh-oh," Harry muttered. The book toppled over the bed with a loud clunk and shuffled rapidly across the room. Harry followed it stealthily. The book was hiding in the dark space under the desk, praying that the Dursleys were fast asleep. Harry got down on his hands and knees and reached down towards it. Ouch! The book snapped out his hand and then flapped past him, its cutting his covers. Harry scrambled around, threw himself forward, and managed to flatten it. Uncle Vernon gave a loud, sleepy grunt, and the room next door, Hedwig and Errol, watched interestedly as Harry clamped and struggled the book tightly in his arms. Harry to his chest and the chest of drawers, and pulled out a belt and buckled the book tightly around it. The monster book shuddered angrily and could no longer flap and snap, so Harry threw it on the bed and reached for Hagrid's card. "Dear Harry, happy birthday! Think you might find this useful for next year. Won't say no more here. Tell you what, when I see you, I'll tell you more. Hope the muggles are treating you right. All the best, Hagrid." It struck Harry as ominous that Hagrid thought a biting book would come to use in school, but he put Hagrid's card on top of Ron's and Hermione's, grinning more broadly than ever. Now there was only the letter from Hogwarts left. Noticing that it was rather thicker than usual, Harry slit open the envelope, pulled out the first page of parchment within, and read, "Dear Harry Potter, please note that the new school year will begin on September the 1st. The Hogwarts Express will leave from the King's Station, platform 9 and 3/4, at 11 o'clock. Third years are permitted to visit the village of Hogsmeade on certain weekends. Please give the enclosed permission slip form to your parents or guardian to sign. A list of books for next year is also enclosed. Yours sincerely, Professor McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry pulled out the Hogsmeade permission form and looked at it, no longer grinning. It would be wonderful to visit Hogsmeade on weekends. He knew it would be entirely wizard village, and he was never going to set foot there. But how on earth was he ever going to persuade Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia to sign the form? He looked at the alarm clock. It was now 2 o'clock in the morning. Deciding that he'd worry about the Hogsmeade form when he woke up, Harry got back into bed and reached up to cross off another day in the chart he'd made for himself, counting down to the days until he would return to Hogwarts. Then he took off his glasses and lay down, eyes open, facing the 3 birthday cards. Extremely unusual, though, was that at the moment Harry Potter felt just like everyone else, glad that for the very first time in his whole life that it was actually his birthday. Okay guys, so that was chapter 1, the Outpost. I'm not going to do chapter 2 right now. I'll do that tomorrow together with chapter 3. But I hope you liked chapter 1, the introduction to this book, because I love it. It's my favorite. And you'll get to learn more about what happens in Harry's third year school year. Third book, third year in school. So anyways, head on to Instagram. There is a brand new page dedicated to this wonderful podcast at Podcast by Kenzie. You'll find us there, KR Live. We're also on Twitter. Go there and follow, which is at Kenzie Rock 100. ROCQUE, Kenzie Rock 100. And we will see you tomorrow for another chapter of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.